Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Have Your Say video where you get to vote on whether you agree with this week's episode of Drag Race. And this video is for Season 17, Episode 5. So today we're going to be recapping the episode, going through the results of the Have Your Say poll, and I'll be talking about a little bit of unrelated drama to do with Eureka addressing some of her past controversies. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start by recapping this week's episode. So the queens come back in after Joella's elimination last week, and obviously they're talking about that. And then some of the queens are celebrating their win, but also some queens seem to be a little bit pressed, perhaps, such as Ariete, that they didn't win last week. And this is going to be a recurring storyline that will actually happen later on this episode in Untucked, so I'll talk about that a little bit later. So RuPaul comes in and we find out that the challenge for this week is going to be RDR Live, which is obviously a spin on Saturday Night Live or SNL. And they have done this a couple of times on Drag Race. I think the first one was All Stars 8 and then they did it last season on season 16. So it looks like this might become a new recurring challenge. And it's basically a series of live skits that are pre-written that the queens have to perform, but they have to perform it in just one take. I will say, personally, I don't get RDR Live that much. Maybe it's just because I've never really watched Saturday Night Live. It's not really a thing in the UK. I have seen clips of it, but it's not something that I grew up with personally. So maybe it's just that style of humour. I think it's okay. I think it's probably better than some of the other challenges that we've had in the past. But this is usually not my personal favourite challenge. I will just say that from the start. For me, the biggest issue is that I'm not a big fan, as I've said multiple times on this channel, I'm not a huge fan of scripted acting challenges. I would much prefer it if it was improv. I can see that improv would be hard to do in one take, but I kind of wish they'd switch it up and it could be a little bit more improv-y because I think that's a fairer measure of people's talent. We then see the queens sitting down and trying to figure out who's going to take what role. And one thing I was really curious about was the apparent editing mistake that happened from this moment. And I did talk about this in a previous video, which I'll link to, but basically in the preview that was on YouTube, in this particular moment, there was actually an editing mistake and then Drag Race took down the preview video. So I was really curious whether the editing mistake would still be in the finished episode. And I rewatched this frame by frame and the editing mistake is actually gone now. So I think Drag Race probably went back and edited the mistake out. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, so now let's get on to the actual RDR Live. And what I'll do is I'll quickly go through and give my thoughts on each queen's performance and I'll do it in order in which they appeared. So in the first skit, which was the Neanderthal Town Hall meeting thing, we're going to first talk about Anya Nerve, who was the mayor, but also the host later on. I thought Anya did so well in this particular skit. This skit was not actually my favourite of all of them. I thought it was one of the weaker ones. I don't think it was particularly funny. But the thing with Anya is that she just has this glint in her eye and she's always doing these really funny facial expressions. So even when she's not talking, your eye is just drawn to her. And she's just very naturally charismatic. So I really enjoyed her in this role. And I also thought doing the host role is probably the hardest role because it happens so quickly and it's not usually that funny. But she was so personable, so likable, did so well doing it. And so I really think she did smash this role. And I think it is arguably the hardest role. So I do give her props for that. And then also in this skit, we had Ariete as Bug and Corey King as Ugg, who are sort of two Neanderthals. I personally didn't really like either of these two performances. They, to me, just weren't really that funny. There wasn't a huge amount you could do with it, but I don't think either of them did a great job. To me, Ariete, I really want to commend her because I think she was really trying. As the judges said, it was a big swing, but it was also, for me, a bit of a miss. I think she just kind of stayed at a 10 out of 10 and there was no peaks and valleys, so it was just a little bit too intense. Whereas Corey, I think, had the opposite problem, that she was not really doing much at all. I think she was quite low energy in this, but I think that she slid under the radar a little bit, and that's why I think she was not in the bottom. But it kind of comes down to, do you commend someone for trying really big but then missing, or do you commend someone for kind of going under the radar a little bit because they didn't necessarily do the most? And then a bit later on in the same skit, we had Lana Del Rey as Brooke. I really enjoyed Lana in this. I thought it was very funny with the bouncing boobs bit, and the fact that she just kept walking back and forth just so she could jiggle the boobs was just really funny to me. I thought that she looked really good. She did the character really well. She was by far, I think, the standout in this particular skit. And something that I saw on Twitter that I thought was quite interesting was that someone asked Lana if this breastplate was Corey King's breastplate, and Lana said yes. Okay, so next we had the Beaverologist podcast. And Sam Starr played Ruth, Hormona Lisa played Ellen, and Jules Sparkles played the guest, which is Connie. So starting off with Sam, the judges didn't like her very deep kind of butch voice that she was doing. And I can sort of see what they're saying, that she did maybe stick out a little bit for not the right reasons, because it did sound a little bit odd. I don't think that she was as bad as they were making out, though. I'm not sure. For me, she would have been the bottom. I actually probably would have put Corey in the bottom, but we'll get onto that in a minute. So I think that Sam wasn't necessarily the best, but I don't think she was as bad as they were making out. Moving on to Hormona, though, I think Hormona was the best in this skit. She really got the characterization down. The fact that she was kind of so desperate looking at the camera, talking about beavers, and the kind of the quivering nature to her voice. I think it just really worked, and she managed to find the funny in the character more so than Sam did. And then we had Jules as the guest, and I thought her choice to do what is supposedly an Australian accent was just quite funny. I quite like it when the queens do accents, even if they're not very good, because it just kind of adds an extra layer of humour to it, because her accent did kind of travel the world. It started off sort of in Australia, then it went kind of to the UK, then it went, I don't know, somewhere else. So her accent was sort of all over the place, but I thought the characterization she did was actually really funny. And then the next skit was QNN News, and the two hosts were Lexi Love and Crystal Envy. There is a lot of scope for humour in these kind of news anchor roles. I just don't think that either of them quite got it or quite really pushed the humour through. I thought they did decently well and they were funny and likeable, but for me, I also think the writing was not that strong. I don't think the jokes were that great. Susie in this scene was kind of set up for the win because her role was just so much funnier. But Lexi and Crystal both did a decent job, but to me, they were very secondary to Susie. And then speaking of which, Susie then came in as Rhonda. And I thought this was clearly by far the standout performance of the night, but it also was the best lines as well. Susie clearly chose very well when she wanted this character. The reason I loved Susie's character so much was because you can really tell that she embodied the character and she was living through the character, but also they were just the funniest lines. The idea that there's this nanny that RuPaul copied all of her isms from is just really funny. Also, someone pointed out online that they thought that Susie here looked a bit like when Yara Sofia tried to do Amy Winehouse on the Snatch Game, and I sort of felt the same way when I saw it. I kind of was getting an Amy Winehouse vibe with the big hair and the cigarettes and stuff, so that was definitely for me part of it. But I thought Susie just really embodied this. She was very funny, and apparently she memorized all of her lines and didn't use the teleprompter, so yeah, I think this was definitely the standout. And then finally we had the emergency room skit, and we had Lydia B. Collins as Gert, and then Acacia Forgot as Trudy, and then the guest judge was the doctor. Now, this was obviously a Golden Girls reference, and personally, as a fan of Golden Girls, I 100% got that straight away. Starting with Acacia, I thought she absolutely nailed this. I really think she deserved more credit because she was just like Blanche Devereaux. The mannerisms, the accent, I think she delivered her lines really well. I also thought the source material for her character out of the two of them was the best because she had the funniest lines. And let's be honest, Blanche is probably one of the funniest characters in the Golden Girls, and that's the character I also would have chosen if it were me. So I do think that Acacia should have got more credit for this. With Lydia as Gert, she was obviously supposed to be the Sophia role. For me, I think this was the harder character, so I will give Lydia some credit and say I think she had a harder job because the lines that she was given and the characterization of trying to do that character is a lot harder because she didn't necessarily have as many jokes. but I just really don't think Lydia did very well. Her performance was maybe the weakest of everyone's because it kind of felt like she was trying, but it just didn't go anywhere. It felt like she was just saying her lines to try and get it over and done with. To me, I think she could have really pushed this a lot further. The makeup and everything was quite funny, and I liked the fact that she was up in the stirrups, and there was a lot of physical comedy with taking out the teeth, but yeah, I think Lydia could have pushed this way, way further. Okay, so we're now going to move on to the runway for this week, and the category was Tickled Pink. So as usual, I'm not going to give my thoughts on the actual fashion because I know nothing about fashion, it's not my thing, but I will say which of the outfits was my favourite. So first up we had Anya Nerve. She said this outfit is straight out of Cleveland, it's head to toe fit, made entirely out of pink shoes. Then we had Corey King. She said this is really, really big clown Barbie, which is the definition of her drag, with a sparkly dress and a fluffy tail. Then we had Arietti. She said she's covered in vinyl right now, and pink is not a colour that she's normally drawn to, and it's very out of the box, but doesn't it look gorgeous? After that we had Lana Geray. She said she decided to represent this runway by paying homage to Little Bo Peep, and it's a very unique silhouette for Lana. After that we had Hormona Lisa. She said she usually always wears pink, she's known as the bubblegum babe, and just like bubblegum she's pink and may turn tasteless if you leave her in your mouth. Then we had Sam Starr. She said this look represents her because she's giving you elevated, expensive taste, and she's known for being a fabulous showgirl. After that we had Jules Sparkles. She said this is actually a repurposed gown from an old pageant gown, and she gave it to a friend of hers and he turned it into this gorgeous look. Next up we had Crystal Envy. She said pink is her favourite colour and she decided to do a full outfit made of silicone, and it's dripping all over her. After that we had Lexi Love. She said in her mind this lovely tickled pink woman is feeling her fantasy in Aspen and she's very rich. After that we had Susie Toot. She said she loves clowns and this look is a 1920s Ziegfeld Follies perspective on a 17th century harlequin. Next up we had Lydia B. Collins. She said this week she's inspired by one of the things that brought her into this world, a penis. And this is exactly what Lydia does, and it has a shtick to it. And then finally we had Acacia Forgot. She said this look is very much like Designing Women meets 80s punk rock, and she's going for a very mean CEO who drinks a martini for breakfast. Overall, I loved this runway. I thought there were some amazing outfits on this runway. For me, the one that stood out the most was probably Jules Sparkles. I just thought it was such a cool silhouette. The part where it draped down from the hat over her shoulders just looked so cool, and the bell bottoms were really interesting and gave such a flow when she walked. And overall, I just loved the shape of it. It looked beautiful. The colour was amazing. Okay, so after the judges' critiques, we find out that the winner for this week is Susie Toot. And the bottom two are Arietti and Lydia B. Collins. The two of them lip-synced the song Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind and Fire and The Emotions. And Lydia is announced as the winner, which means that unfortunately Arietti is told to sashay away. However, before that happens, they also do the badunk-a-dunk tank twist. Arietti chooses lever number 7 and Michelle gets dunked, which means that Arietti is saved from elimination, with the levers being 1 and 7 representing season 17. Also, I just quickly want to talk about Untucked for this episode because it was quite a big talking point, which we'll discuss in a little bit as well. So for those of you who haven't watched Untucked, a few of the queens, particularly Arietti, Lana, and a few others, seemed very pressed that Susie was in the top and they didn't like her outfit and they thought that they should have been in the top because their outfits were better. And Susie kind of clapped back at them and said that the judges liked her outfit and that's what's important to her, not what the others think. And one of the big talking points was that there was a lot of drag delusion going on with some of the queens, especially some of the queens such as Lexi, Arietti, Lana, who apparently were saying that they were not in the Kumbaya Girls Club. And so a lot of people online were saying that those queens were kind of dishing it out, but then they couldn't take it. And it was ironic because they were calling the other girls the Kumbaya Girls. But I did really enjoy this Untucked episode, and I'm glad that Untucked is having these interesting shady moments because it makes it actually worth watching. Okay, so let's move on to the results of the Have Your Say poll. So question 1 was, do you like the RDR Live challenge? And we had 62.7% for yes and 37.3% for no. As I said earlier, it's not my favourite challenge. I personally just don't get the type of humour. Maybe it's just me. I just don't find it that funny usually. But I do prefer over some of the other challenges that they've done in the past. So I personally think it's fine, but it wouldn't be something I'll write home about. Question 2 was, who was the best in the RDR Live challenge? And we had Susie Toot with 61.1%, Anya Nerve with 21.2%, and Hormona Lisa with 8.5%. I do 100% agree. Susie smashed it for me. She was so funny. Her role was probably the best role, in my opinion, in terms of the actual lines that they were given, but she really embodied the character. She was very funny, and she definitely proved that she's a great actress and got really good comedic timing. Question 3 was, who had the best runway outfit? This was a little bit mixed this week, but we had Arietti with 31.9%, Jules Sparkles with 22.5%, and Susie Toot with 14%. I did love Arietti's. I thought the vinyl was amazing, and she always has a really, really impressive look, so this was no exception. The reason I gave it to Jules personally for my favourite was just because I liked the idea of it being something that's repurposed but is very different. I really liked the silhouette. It was very fun, lots of really interesting things to look at, so that's why I personally gave it to Jules. But this was a very strong runway in general with lots of very good outfits. Question 4 was, did you agree with the tops? And we had 64.5% for yes and 35.5% for no. So a pretty decent result for yes, but it also wasn't a landslide either. So going on to question 5, which is related, which was, if you selected no above, as in you did not agree with the tops, who do you think should have been in the top instead? Now, I know some of you always say that it's not very representative to have the NA in this graph. So looking at it, obviously you can see the biggest portion is NA. So let's take out the NA, and this is now what the graph looks like once the NAs are taken out. So of the people who did select no, as in they did not agree with the tops, the person they voted for overwhelmingly was Acacia Forgot with 55.8% of the remaining votes, not overall. And then after that it was Lana with 15.5% and then Jules with 9.1%. I do agree, as I said, I really thought Acacia did such a good job. I do wonder if she should have been in the top, but I'm not sure who she should have been in the top instead of. Ultimately, I don't think she was a winner, though I think Susie definitely won, so it probably doesn't matter hugely, but I do think that Acacia deserved more props than she got. Question 6 was, did you agree with the bottoms? And again, this was a strong result for no being 61.8%, and then yes got 38.2%, so still a strong result, but not necessarily a landslide. Question 7, which is related, is if you selected no above, as in you did not agree with the bottoms, who should have been in the bottom instead? Again, this is what the graph looks like in general with the NAs, but if we take the NAs out, you can see it a bit differently. And Corey King got the majority of the remaining votes with 59.2%. And then after that, it was Crystal Envy with 13.7% and Lana Geray with 8.5%. Now, I do agree. I do think Corey probably should have been in the bottom instead of Sam, because I do think Corey's role was just a little bit forgettable, and I don't think she hugely embodied it that much. So I would agree with that, but I do think that Arietti and Lydia did a little bit worse. So I think the bottom 2 was actually correct, but perhaps Corey should have been bottom 3. What I also thought was interesting is that Lana got 8.5 in this particular vote, saying that she should have been in the bottom. But Lana also got 15.5% in the previous question about who should have been in the top. So it's quite interesting that in both, she seems to get quite a lot of votes for being both she should have been in the top or the bottom. Question 8 was, who won the lip sync in your opinion? And this was a huge landslide, with Lydia getting 95.7% and Arietti only getting 4.3%. And unfortunately, I do have to agree. I really like Arietti, but I do think Lydia was actually surprisingly really good. I don't think anyone expected Lydia to be that great because we've not really seen her dance or anything, but she was actually really good. She hit all the beats. RuPaul was really laughing and entranced by what Lydia was doing, so you could tell she was going to win. And I just don't think Arietti quite caught the vibe of the song. Question 9 was, who do you think will win the season? This was very split between 3 queens. So we had Susie Toot with 35.5%, Lexi Love with 30.8%, and then Anya Nerve with 28.4%. And then moving on to question 10, which is similar, but it's who do you want to win the season? And again, this kind of shifted it, although the same three queens come up again. So we had this time, Lexi Love got 29.9%, Susie 2 got 24.6%, and Anya got 18.5%. So although the same three queens came up for both these questions, actually the percentages have shifted. So it seems that more people think that Susie will win, but then more people actually want Lexi to win. Although it's still very close between Lexi and Susie, so I do think Lexi and Susie are definitely going to be top 2, top 3, and I think Anya's also up there as well. It just depends what the rest of the challenges are. But let me know in the comments what you think. Okay, so moving on to the comments for this week, and we'll start with my Patreon comments. So my Patreon Amy said, "Here's my 2 cents. Anya is the literal queen of Untucked, and man oh man do I love her. As for Susie, I pegged her for the episode win the moment she came out as a cross between Jinx Monsoon and Bianca Del Rio in the RDR Live sketch. This queen clearly knows sketch comedy, and maybe she has a future on Sketchy Queens." I do agree, I do love Anya, she's so funny. In Untucked, she was clearly living for the fact that the other queens were kind of trying to read Susie, but they were actually the ones who were really bothered by it, and Anya kind of pointed that out. And I just think Anya is just so funny. She just sits there and she just smiles, and she doesn't even have to say anything, but she's so entertaining. And I did mention this earlier, it did seem to be quite a big thing this episode that the girls were coming for Susie, even though they said that Susie and some of the other girls were the so-called kumbaya girls who can't take a joke. But then the other girls actually were the ones who couldn't take the joke and were getting pressed that Susie was in the top. So I think this is an interesting development, but I'm just appreciative that Untucked is actually watchable and funny, because previously it's been really boring. And then my Patreon member Jessica said, "Wish that they would give Acacia her flowers. I get her fashion may not be as polished as some of the others, but she is meeting more of the charisma, uniqueness, nerve and talent than some of the others." My Patreon Emmy said, "I found it so funny how they were talking about the Kumbaya girls always being offended when it was then the anti-Kumbaya girls being offended in Untucked. Love this season." And then moving on to the comments from the Have Your Say poll, someone said something very similar and said, "I feel like no one likes Acacia the God, but she's like one of my favourites, and it really sucks seeing what people think about her because people literally forget she's in the season and talk bleep about her for literally no reason." There were also quite a few comments about RDR Live in general, kind of echoing what I said, and some people said, "The writing for RDR Live was average, Queens did the best based on the lackluster script." And as I said earlier, I do think the writing is not great and it does confine the queens and limit what they can do, which is a shame. But then on the other hand, there were also comments from people saying they really liked this RDR Live, and someone said, "Best RDR Live, this cast is so talented. Matt, I love your videos." Thank you very much for that. And then the whole thing about Untucked was quite a big talking point in the comments. Someone said, "I don't know why the girls are so pressed about Susie's outfit. It wasn't that bad, and also this is a comedy challenge." And similarly, someone said, "I didn't like the Kumbaya girls thing because at the end of the day, the not Kumbaya girls were the ones pressed in Untucked. The call is from inside the house." And as I said, I do agree. I think it's just fun TV moment. I don't think we should read too much into it, but it is very interesting to see maybe some of the drag delusion happening. Also, someone points out something really interesting and said, Arietti's 17 tattoo kept getting shown off in the Getting Ready seeds just for her to end up pulling the one lever, thus completing the 17 for the badunkadunk. Either really good foreshadowing or a great coincidence. And I didn't notice this at first, but then someone pointed it out on Twitter. I didn't even see that Arietti had a 17 tattoo, but it is interesting that that's what ended up happening. Let me know in the comments if you noticed this tattoo. And in general, as I've said before, thank you so much to everyone who left really lovely positive comments. I really love reading your comments about how much you love these videos. It does take me a long time to make these videos, so I really appreciate all of these lovely comments. Even if I can't show them all, I do try and read all of them. So thank you so much for your support. I really, really appreciate it. Okay, so finally, moving on to some drama that's unrelated to season 16, and it's to do with Eureka addressing her past controversies. As you may know, Eureka has had a bit of a checkered past when it comes to controversies and dramas that she's been involved in. Well, a few weeks ago, Eureka appeared on Mistress Isabel Brooks' YouTube channel in a video called Exposing Eureka O'Hara's Biggest Scandals, Eureka Tells All. In the video, Eureka addressed some of her past controversies, and there was also a little bit of drama that happened after the video came out, which Eureka responded to. So I'm going to briefly go through some of the main points of what happened. Okay, so as we all know, Mistress is known for being very funny and shady, and she regularly has guests on her YouTube channel, and she pokes fun at them and makes shady comments. Well, at the beginning of the video, Mistress said Eureka was there to address the controversies and was being quite jokey about it. However, Eureka then said that she actually didn't want to be there really because she knew what Mistress was going to ask her, and she said to Mistress that she didn't like her, although that part I think was a joke. Eureka then proceeded to get quite emotional and started tearing up, and Mistress seemed to be genuinely confused and surprised that Eureka was so upset. Mistress kept saying that Eureka had agreed to do the interview, and it felt a little bit awkward.
It's up. Out of all the amazing work I've done in my career, you should consider that. I'm just being honest. I asked if you're okay with it. No, I'm not.
However, Eureka eventually said that she does want to address these controversies because she feels like the reason she gets in trouble so much is because she tries to rectify the situations, but then she ends up getting criticized for it. Mistress also supported Eureka and said some nice things about her, which seemed to ease the awkwardness. And I'll link to Mistress's full video in the description, and you should go and watch the whole thing because it was quite interesting. Okay, so the first controversy that they addressed was that Eureka is smelly. Just in case you don't know, I did talk about this in a previous video which I'll link to in the description, but a while back, Eureka was on the Very Delta podcast and said that her luggage got lost one time on tour, and Kim Chi had not let her borrow some clothes because she said they weren't the same size, and Eureka said that Kim was in denial that they're both a similar size. Kim Chi then later responded on a different podcast saying that Eureka smells and doesn't wash regularly, which is why Kim refused to let Eureka borrow her outfits on tour. And these comments got a huge amount of traction on social media, and people started then making jokes about Eureka being smelly. Kim also shared a story saying that there was also a fight between Eureka and Bob the drag queen while Bob was standing up for Kim on tour. And so Mistress asked Eureka if she really smells. Eureka laughed and said there's moments when we all smell, and she's a 6'4", 400-pound person. She then mentioned Kim and said she had seen that Kim had been vulnerable on Twitter and was talking about her size, which is why Eureka thought it was okay for her to talk about it on the podcast. But then Eureka said that Kim's tweets were deleted shortly afterwards, and it seemed that people were then doing to Eureka what they had just done to Kim Chi, and it seemed like it was, quote, revenge. Mistress asked if Eureka and Kim could ever make up, and Eureka said she thinks they already did make up because at the end of that tour, Kim gave an outfit to Eureka, and even though Kim didn't apologise, Eureka felt that this was Kim's way of apologising. And Eureka said that she actually ended up giving the outfit to Cornbread right before Cornbread got on Drag Race. Mistress also said the reason she even brought up the Kim Chi story on Very Delta was because she was asked about it and it's a podcast, and the whole point is that you're supposed to talk about things, and Mistress agreed. They then looked at Eureka's tweet when she responded to the backlash she was getting with people calling her smelly, and she felt like they had all been making fun of her behind her back while she was dealing with a lot of things in her life, like her mother having cancer. Eureka said that she was, quote, triggered when this all happened, and she had no idea that her being smelly was the reason they acted like that. She just thought that they didn't want her to win season 10 or that they were just being shady. But Eureka acknowledged that that was a tough time for her back then when she was on tour, and she was partying a lot, so she probably did smell. Okay, so the next thing they talked about was a funny but weird cameo video that Eureka had done, which got a lot of attention on social media.
Listen, when I tell you the plastic chairs are not the motherfucker one, the sundress with no panties and your kitty was on photo, girl, you know what you do? Honestly, you spread it open wide and you smack that kitty and you say, ram, motherfucker, ram.
Eureka explained that she had fully relapsed the day that she did that cameo, and she joked about it, saying that she acknowledges that she's had issues with addiction in the past, but she probably just wanted the money so that she could go out and party. Then, later in the video, they moved on to another of probably the biggest controversies to do with Eureka, which was when Eureka once said the N-word in a video, which she was highly criticised for, with people saying Eureka is racist, and Eureka had also once said that she wished she was black. Mistress asked Eureka about it because it constantly comes up, but Eureka had never really fully addressed this, and Eureka said she wanted to explain what happened. Eureka said her best friend is a black woman and the N-word is just something that they would say to each other or sing to each other. And the clip of Eureka saying the N-word was actually taken from a video when they were both singing it to each other. But she said it was messed up because her friend got, quote, put on blast where they live because of the video. Eureka said she was 18 at the time and she's now 34, although that's no excuse. And as a white person saying the N-word, it's racist and taking something that doesn't belong to you. And she said it's, quote, letting yourself pretend as though you can walk in the shoes of someone who has been oppressed by that word, and I wouldn't know that and don't. Mistress then said that this is something that's going to be brought up all the time, which is why she is giving Eureka the chance to talk about it. But Eureka said she does not think she deserves to be forgiven. She thinks that she's grown and is not the same person that she was then, and she's educated herself about it. But it's something that she'll have to take responsibility for forever, and she didn't know how to react to it at the time, which made it worse. Also, at the end of the interview, Eureka broke down in tears, reflecting on her life and her struggles, and hoped that people could see that she's changed. There was also a lot more that happened in the video, so make sure you go and check out the full video on Mistress's channel, and I'll link to it in the description. After the video came out, it got some criticism on social media, and Eureka tweeted that the video was, quote, hard to watch, and that she's mentally not in the best place, but she appreciated connecting with Mistress. A Twitter user then said that people were bullying Eureka in the comments and suggested that Mistress should have sent Eureka the video before posting it. But Mistress responded to this and said, we had 2 separate phone calls where I showed her the video in its entirety and asked if she had any changes or concerns. Mistress also retweeted Eureka's tweet where she said the video was hard to watch, and Mistress said, first lesson of 2025, no good deed goes unpunished. And she attached a video to the tweet with a counter that said Eureka approval counter, which went up every time Eureka said in the video that she was happy to proceed with the video. Mistress's tweet got a lot of traction, and people weren't sure if this was a genuine drama or just a joke. Eureka then tweeted saying, enjoy the clicks, I'll respond to all this tomorrow. Then, the next day, Eureka tweeted saying, some of y'all will look for a reason to not like someone and that's okay. I am allowed to feel how I feel. If you don't like me for any reason, that's too bad because I'm a good person, an okay friend, and really great at being on the struggle bus because I'm honest and open about what I'm going through. I don't regret speaking my truth. No matter how many times I watch the video, it's hard to watch because I'm faced with my own reality. That is, that I have a lot of healing to do, and that's my goal right now. Side note, I've enjoyed connecting with Mistress Isabel Brooks, and we spoke on the phone to clear this up. Everyone please have a blessed day. Eureka also followed this up with another tweet where she said Mistress sensed Eureka was uncomfortable during the video and had supported her. And the two of them have since spoken, and Eureka has come to terms with the fact that she's not a social media girl because she reacts too much. And Mistress had been defensive because she had taken the time to comfort Eureka, but Eureka said she loves Mistress and supports her. And so, although Eureka's video with Mistress may have stirred up some criticism online, it appears that Eureka and Mistress are on good terms with each other, and perhaps the reaction to this video was blown out of proportion online. And as I always say in my videos, please be kind to people online, and it's not okay for people to leave mean comments or send hate. Just enjoy this sort of content passively and don't get involved. So there you go, there was the Have Your Say for Season 17, Episode 5. Are you happy that the Badunkadunk Tank twist has now ended? And do you think that the runway actually matters, or is the challenge the most important? Let me know in the comments. If you'd like to get exclusive benefits such as early access to my videos and having your comment featured in my Have Your Say videos as well as many other benefits, please consider signing up to my Patreon. It just costs a few dollars a month, it really supports my channel and is such a huge lifeline to me and my channel, so please consider, and I'll put a link in the description. And I would just like to say thank you so much to my Patreon members. Your support is truly incredible. I am so humbled and so appreciative of all of your support. I really love seeing you have your say comments. I really love this community that I've built on Patreon. So thank you all so much for supporting me. It really does mean more than you know. If you liked this video, please make sure you like and comment on the video because it really helps boost the algorithm and tell YouTube to promote this to other people. And please make sure you subscribe because it really makes a huge difference to my channel. So hit that subscribe button now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me again for some future videos. Thank you, bye!